United States Education Foundation. And Professor Richard Breyer, along with his family, he visited Bangalore, and several times he has visited India. So today we have an excellent occasion to listen to him. He's an excellent director, scriptwriter, and he's an expert in documentary production. I think I have the pleasure of watching quite a lot of his documentaries, and indirectly, he's the guru for all of us in television production. He's a teacher of all of you, all of us, especially in my generation, people with 3 decades of teaching experience. Because when we entered the teaching profession, in those days, it was television had entered India. It was the era of Doordarshan, and Professor Richard Breyer, we studied his book, and indirectly, he was our guru to teach television production. And I'm very happy today we have Professor Richard Breyer, sir. On behalf of all of us, I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir. It's a great pleasure, and it's an honor to the Department of Communication, Bangalore University. In spite of your busy schedule, you accepted our invitation. So we'll start the program, and may I request my colleague, Dr. Shailashri, Associate Professor at Department of Communication, Bangalore University, to welcome the chief guest and all the participants. Over to Dr. Shailesh.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, dignitaries and distinguished participants. With a great pleasure, I welcome you all for another insightful session with the eminent speaker for the 5th day of the webinar. Your feedback and response are inspiring us to take a bound to the next phase. Thank you for the continuous encouragement and support throughout the last 4 days of the international webinar. I welcome everybody to 5th day of the webinar on behalf of the Department of Communication, Bangalore University, Bangalore, for its first edition of international level webinar on the resiliency of media in the times of global crisis, challenges and opportunities. Hearty welcome to chief guest and key speaker of the day, Richard Breyer, renowned documentary producer. I also welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Venugopal K.R. I heartily welcome my colleagues, Dr. B.K. Ravi, Professor and Chairman, Department of Communication and Webinar Chairperson, and Dr. Sanjeev Raja, Associate Professor and Webinar Convener. Richard Breyer is a Professor of Television, Radio and Film in Syracuse University, New York. Richard Breyer is Director of Documentary Films and History, a joint master's degree program offered by the Newhouse School and the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs at Syracuse University. His films include Freedom's Call, it's about the civil rights movement, North of 49, about the Sikh community in upstate New York, Esta Esperanza, about post-civil war, E.L. Salvador, Dancing on Mother Earth, about singer Joan Shendoa. Faces in the famine, about Ethiopian famine, and 300 Miles to Freedom, about fugitive slave John W. Jones. His documentaries are distributed throughout PBS and Filmmakers Library, and Breyer has twice been a Fulbright scholar to India and helped launch one of the India's prime cable companies, Sony Entertainment Television. He is the author of Making Television Program, a Professional Approach. He has written essays and articles for NPR, Hemisphere, Marsala, Global Perspectives, and The World and I. I heartily welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shailashri. Now I request Professor Richard Breyer, Professor Television, Radio and Film, Newhouse School of Public Communication, Syracuse University in New York. He will speak to you on the future of the documentary. Sir, over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your kind introduction, both of you. I'm honored to be part of this webinar. I am honored to take on this large subject that you gave me. And this is not the first time I've been honored and gratified with an affiliation with you, with Bangalore, and with India. I, like all of us, have favorite moments, high moments in my life, the headlines of my story, and many of them happened in India. When we made the film Kasturi, and I met Rajani Khan, I haven't washed my hand I'm making a joke, but since I shook his hand many years ago. And also there were wonderful experiences with my children growing up in India, and so many things are going through my mind as I speak. I got very ill one time, and that's bad, but the kindness that was shown by everyone that got me well was another representation of what's so special about your country. So thank you. And then, as was said in the introduction, some of my films have been about India. So way back, we did a film, a National Geographic type film about Bhutan when it was just opening up to the West, and that was a very rich experience. And then we made the film Kasturi, which was also very wonderful experience. And then other events, including being part of the launch for Sony Entertainment Television, and all that meant. So I have been given this wonderful, rich topic to deal with, the future of the documentary. And first, I'll warn you and say, I'm not going to offer you that one-liner, because there is no one-liner. The future, especially in this time, with all of the things that have been happening, is unpredictable, and I am not so arrogant to think that I can even offer a clean description of its future. But I will say what I would like the future of the documentary to be, and the opportunity that the documentary provides. I'm not the only one saying that in this country and across the world, maybe in your country as well, this tradition that goes back to the Enlightenment, this tradition of democracy, which our countries share, is at risk. And it's simple to it's simple, and I think too simple, and to point the finger at one event or one person. Not Donald Trump. He and his enablers are creating risks to this beautiful model of how communities come together in an enlightened way, and the traditions of democracy are at risk. And he is one of the reasons, but it doesn't begin and end with him. The documentary can, and I pray, will be a pillar or a weapon in a benign way that is used to protect us from the destruction of the Enlightenment tradition. And in very simple terms, you're all scholars, so you could do better. We could have a nice discussion about the Enlightenment, but bottom line, it seems to me, it is where we commit ourselves to doing the best we can within, when we discourse, to offer our version of the truth in fictional sense, in a news sense, and the truth in a documentary sense. That the best we can do in our to convey that. And we're imperfect. It's an imperfect process, and I think it should be celebrated, because there is no such thing as the absolute truth. That's the most dangerous. Those who believe that tend to be the most dangerous people. But it's the effort to offer my genuine, sincere version of the truth, and that's the basis of our discourse. That's at risk, and it wasn't invented in 2016 by, but this reality has been around for a long time. I mean, Madison Avenue did its part in presenting versions, presenting material that is not truthful. Some would say, well, that's the lubricant for commerce, and I agree with that. And I also think that in some ways ads are fair because we know they're exaggerations and sometimes fabrications. And 2016 political lies weren't invented, or exaggerations. Nor the idea of a story or coming up with a piece of propaganda that supports ideology or supports one's individual interest as compared to doing the best they can to convey some version of truth. That wasn't invented in 2016 either. But things have changed, and I think the risks are greater. And in preparing today, and again, such an honor to be invited to be part of this event, and also an honor to, is it honor the right word? A pleasure, I guess is the right word, to grapple with this large issue. Led me to think of the life my parents lived. And again, there were exaggerators and there were liars in their time. And I'm sure in your parents' time, in your grandparents' time, it wasn't invited. It wasn't invented. But the amount of media, the amount of information coming to us through a screen, again, I'm not saying anything that we all recognize, is so profoundly greater in this time compared to previous. And that gets in the way, that gets in the way, that reality gets in the way of this Enlightenment model, it seems to me. And gets in the way of education at its best, it seems to me. Because in my view, education is about inviting, liberating, igniting curiosity, igniting the curiosity to enter the world and discover whatever there is out there, and to see the world as complex as it is, to see the world in gray rather than black and white. Media, maybe quotes Marshall McLuhan here or others, Amusing Ourselves to Death, that book comes to mind, in which by getting the world in a mediated way, there is a tendency toward black and white. And certainly it's a different kind of experience. That two-dimensional experience is different than going out in the world and getting lost. Being plugged in is very different from being unplugged and walking down a country road or into a setting and meeting a stranger. But there's not a lot of that walking down country roads without our headsets on, and less of time away from our screens, and that's a real risk. So the documentary at its ideal should contribute to that. And that's a real challenge. And again, I think it's just interesting to think of how the discourse was executed in my parents' generation, and how time was used. I mean, my parents looked at screens. If you like the news every evening, same version, I think, in India, in the evening, newspaper in the morning, much more conversation, not because they were better people, but because there was time to do that. And some downtime, looking out the window, not because they were better people or they were meditators, just because there was nothing to fill up that space. But now every moment is filled up. And it isn't just the kids I have many colleagues. I had a dinner party the other night, and we sort of said to one another, okay, what's your day like? And a couple of my colleagues, great professors, sort of bemoan the fact that they get up in the morning and they're just plugged in all day. And I think that's not right. I mean, they have their lives, and again, they're contributors, but we all should watch this, I think. Because there is the possibility of losing this gift that we have of self-discovery from unpredictable opportunities that real life contributes. Solving problems. Again, I worry about our students now. Go back to my students, not my colleagues, who are pampered too much. Not just because, you know, parents call them every 15 minutes or text them every 15 minutes or want to get a, you know, the technology provides that, but because they're so fearful of going out and getting lost without bringing their phone. So I haven't, this isn't in my notes, but one of the things that I try and do in some of the activities that I have with my students is to have them transcend a little bit and look at what role their phones play in their lives, and to have experiences in which they're not plugged in, and see how that tastes. And as simple and as common sense as that sounds, that's a big deal to the modern young person. So again, my notes here, I'm just repeating what I said before. The documentary, at its best, doesn't provide answers, it provides questions. The documentary, at its best, provides gray rather than black and white in terms of answering questions. And that, to some degree, can be contradict the expectations and be in contrast to the other media, to what happens frequently. The most blatant example is propaganda and commercials. Persuasive media provide answers. This woman is the best candidate, and her opponent is the worst. This political party has the answers, this doesn't. Pepsi-Cola is great, Coca-Cola isn't, you know, whatever. So I thought a lot about this issue in theory, in preparing for today. And then I wanted to share with you some of my favorite documentaries that achieved what I think should be done with the documentary, and how a positive future in this can be, how the documentary can contribute to a positive future for our cultures, our countries, our democracies. So what came to mind is the George Floyd documentary. The video, Murder, Floyd, is a piece of nonfiction, piece of, if you like, a documentary, maybe not structured in a conventional way. And look what that did. Look at the power of that relatively short amount of video. Especially young people left the security of their homes and screens and went out into the world to try and make it a better, make the world a better place. And they risked something in doing that. They were confronted with tear gas, rubber bullets sometimes, the disdain of political leaders sometimes. So there was there was physical risk. And there's evidence of people who were harmed. And then this was during a pandemic. So they risked being infected. That one piece of media affected all of us worldwide, especially the young people. And it crossed political lines and social lines. There were protests in small towns, suburban towns, as well as where you would expect in large urban settings. And it wasn't just progressives or people of a certain political ideology. It crossed all borders. And to me, that was a beautiful example of where nonfiction media, which we can put documentary into that box, or we can call the Floyd video a documentary. It represents how the documentary can make our world better, sustain our democracy, sustain this tradition of the Enlightenment. It's very inspiring how that film of that tragedy affected especially the young. So many of us, I assume many of you, if not all of you, are educators. So this is a transition into how I see my role and I see your role in terms of the documentary. And to be very, very simple, I think it's our job to help young people be responsible citizens, critics, in a good sense. I don't mean negative, I mean having a critical sense of especially nonfiction material. And that's one of our jobs. Whether we're in a media school, in fact, I teach courses outside of the media school, and those may be more important than the ones inside the media school, because there's a tendency for this to be new and exciting for people in the history departments and other areas outside of my school. And we also have the job, many of us, of preparing young people to be responsible filmmakers. The documentary is a very powerful genre, and it can be used for good and for bad, like all things. One only has to go to YouTube to see examples of, in my view, irresponsible use of the documentary tradition. I'll say jokingly, you can find a documentary on YouTube about mermaids taking over the Pacific. And it's done in the tradition, looks like a BBC production with a narrator with the right kind of accent that sounds very credible. And to the uneducated, the mermaids are taking over the Pacific. And so there's a place where an awareness, a sensitivity, a critical sense would be useful in the viewer's part. And also, the filmmaker was irresponsible. And that's a pretty benign example. There's other examples of, in a political, ideological way, in which the tradition is being exploited, and that offends me deeply. I just don't think there's an excuse for that. And again, it's a complex issue, because there are political realities and so on and so forth, but that's my view. So how do we achieve our goals of helping our students be more critical viewers and training young filmmakers to produce films that not only inform, but also invite going out into the world and discovering what's out there, not just depending on whatever's on Netflix or the system that they're using, HBO, whatever, Amazon. So in my experiences, the first stop, the first part of the process is to ask students, what is a documentary? How is it different from other genre? And I'll divide the world into three very, very simple categories. Divide the media world into three very, very simple categories. Nonfiction, obviously documentaries inside of that. Fiction, we could spend, I mean, at one level, I think we all know what fiction is. And another level, there's fictional truth and all that kind of nuanced stuff that we could talk about. But essentially, I think persuasive, where propaganda, commercials, where the storyteller, the filmmaker, begins the process knowing what the objective is: to sell Coca-Cola, to frame whoever the political candidate is in a positive light, to sell. And educational media, again, education is different from propagandizing people, but we do know what our objectives are. So in some ways, you might put that in the second category. So then I'll ask you, maybe somebody can throw in and play my game. I'll throw an answer into the chat box, and Professor Ravi can read. So what is a documentary? How do you distinguish a documentary from fiction and persuasion? Any takers?
Anybody wants to react, they can put their reaction on the chat.
If you have, I mean, just a sentence. Documentaries are, nonfiction is. No takers? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be more fun if we were in the same room. I don't know. I'd figure it out. So in the discussion in my classes, you know, it's usually pretty healthy. And I like it when a student says, well, documentaries deal with truth and fiction deals with non-truth. And then, well, I can say, well, what about a fiction film that's based on something that actually happened?
Professor, there is one.
Yeah, wonderful.
1 second. There is one. There is one answer for a question.
Yeah, please.
Simi Tine. She has said documentary is based on real events.
Okay, good.
And Shireen Tabu, she says a documentary shares real life experiences. And Suparna Naresh says it is more real based on facts. Amrita Balakrishnan says it's objective. These are the answers.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. That's richer than. Thank you so much. Very rich. We won't go back and forth, but I really appreciate your answers. Thank you. And so let's say based on fact. So if this was a class, and students have said similar things, I would say, well, what about, like one of my favorite documentaries is When We Were Kings, about Muhammad Ali and George Foreman's big fight in Zaire. Goes way back, won an Academy Award way back. And then there was a fictional version of it. And it was, based on fact. So what's the difference between those two? And objective?
Professor, there is one more. Can I?
Please, yes.
Maybe. Manasi KG says, documentary means documenting facts. It's also about how we present it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Facts, objective, truth. These are all, valid. And again, if we're having, if we were sitting around having a conversation, I might bring up fiction that is also based on these things. And objective, wonderful word. And again, there's nuances there. But in general, I agree with where you're going. And again, thank you for your answers. It makes it more fun. I will add to the discussion in the way that I add to my students' discussion, is to say, it is, to me, the difference between the three genres is the covenant. I like the word covenant because it's got that sound of almost religious. So if I'm a documentary filmmaker, I have a different covenant with the audience than if I'm a fiction filmmaker. If I'm a fiction filmmaker, Superman can fly. If I'm a documentary filmmaker, you can have Superman fly, but you have to objectively, you have to have witnessed that. You have to have, you have to have reasonable faith that it's true. You're giving it, So, and in my experience, Superman is a fictitious thing, so I wouldn't make a documentary about that. And then when you make a commercial, your covenant with your audience is that you are manipulating the truth, if you like. And for adults, that covenant I find okay, ethical. I have problems with that covenant as it applies to children and old people. I don't think they are able to determine between persuasion and manipulation and truth. Oh, to go back to a documentary, our covenant is to do the best we can to do what you all described so eloquently: objective, truth, and so on. Facts. A documentary could very much look like a fiction piece. I've seen documentaries, and so have you, which are animation, which use actors, which are reenacted. I have no problem with that, as long as the filmmaker is true to the covenant, respecting that we look at documentaries, or the audience looks at documentaries as objective, fact-based, and so on. We could spend the hours talking about, what truth is, but are you giving it your best shot within the tradition of the Enlightenment? Are you giving it your best shot to offer your version of fact, truth, objectivity? And that's your covenant, your obligation, the morality, if you like, of filmmaking in the documentary tradition, which not everyone, sadly, fulfills. So another part of the discussion in my classes, and thank you for being part of this, is the issue of the visual language. That is how we tell fiction, nonfiction, persuasive stories visually. And this discussion, it seems to me, is important because there is a tendency to not exploit the visual language in the documentary. There is a tendency to not tell stories like we tell stories in commercials, or like we tell stories in in fiction. And we consciously or unconsciously use the visual language to convey ideas if things are on the screen. And you are a better viewer if you're visually literate, and you're a better filmmaker if you're visually literate. So if we could see the second slide in the PowerPoint.
Prashant, shall we start the PowerPoint, sir?
Yeah, so we skip that and skip that. Yeah, this one. Okay, so this is in a beautiful documentary which I have shown to my students and I've seen a number of times. I really think it's a beautiful piece that succeeds in informing, especially my students, about something they know nothing about and now do, the Iraq-Iran war. So here is an image from their trailer. How is the visual language exploited? I have, later on the PowerPoint, I'll reveal my secrets and give you what I consider to be, I don't know, 15, 20 elements of the visual language. And those elements are in my bag of tricks. When I make a documentary, I ask myself, how am I going to use the visual language in this moment? Whether it's an interview or whether I'm showing somebody doing things. And fiction filmmakers do the same. I mean, people who make advertisements do the same. There's a tendency to think that we don't do that by some. But the visual language, again, so much is being conveyed non-verbally. And that kind of literacy, I think, is very, very important if one is going to be a critical thinker in this day and age, and if one is going to be a successful filmmaker. So I'll just start by saying the color of this film, right? The black and white of it. It'd be a very different image if it was in color, or if it was in rich, you know. I'll show how old I am. Kodachrome color. If the greens really came out. So, and how the shot is framed, including the foreground and background, and the kinds of cars and trucks, the kind of car and bus in the background. And the young man on the left. So if we can look at this image like it is a Bollywood product, like there was a costumer, someone in charge of costuming, someone in charge of setting, someone in charge of lighting, someone in charge of casting, a director who told the actors what to do, a cinematographer who moved the camera. This is a still shot, but you know there's movement in it. Who zoomed the camera in? Does he zoom the camera in, or does she truck the camera in? When the action passes to the right, does the camera pan? Does the cinematographer pan with it, or does the cinematographer allow the actors, participants, to walk out of frame? The same visual language that's used in fiction is used in nonfiction, but it can feel invisible. And sensitizing one to the visual language and how powerful it is, because it skips the brain, it goes to the heart, or whatever the metaphor is. It's not, our critical sense isn't fully on when we look at visuals. When we see a baby crying, we don't analyze it, we just feel it. And so the visual language must, I believe, be fully exploited if you're going to convey your ideas. I think of the Floyd video. There was no narration. There was no. We heard. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. But so much of the power of that image, of those images, was conveyed through the visual language. And I think, there have been other examples of murders of persons of color by the police, but for all sorts of reasons, not just the way that that was shot, but the way it was shot and the theater of it, and the shot composition, and the lighting, and the quality of Mr. Floyd's voice begging for his breath were very significant, big part of it. So what I do in my class is I take an image like this and ask the students to come up with what the creative team used, what elements of the visual language the creative team used to convey their ideas. And then I also ask them, what does this image tell them? Who's the protagonist? What's happening? Where are we? All of those things that are conveyed visually. Can we go to the next slide? Prashant? Thank you. So here's another image from, there's two protagonists in that film, and this is the other. And so again, here's how, what do we learn about this man? Before we even hear one word from him. You want to play a little bit, my game? What do we learn about him? Again, let's be children in the most basic way. How does this image communicate to us? If you have any thoughts, pop it into this chat room. So how the shot composition, the facial expression, the costuming, the depth of field, the way light falls on this guy's face. He's not in an office, clearly. He's a blue collar. I use blue collar. He's a blue collar worker. He probably works with his hands. He's in some industrial setting. Could be sad. All of this we get visually. And again, we know it, we feel it, but I think consciously being aware of this visual language is a big step toward being visually literate and toward being an effective filmmaker.
Professor, there is one
Wonderful.
reaction. It is from JP.
Thank you.
He says, the person on screen looks sad,
Yes.
boxed up in.
The last thing, I'm sorry, second thing?
The person on screen looks sad, boxed up in.
Yes. Thank you. I agree. And again, we get that, it's the angle, clearly the expression, and the way the light falls on his face, but also the angle. He's in a slightly inferior angle, which makes, invites our sympathy. So Prashant, can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So, again, these are the elements that I offer the students. And we might go back and look at examples of angle, background setting, casting, composition, color grain, etc. And I might give them an assignment to say, okay, you three students, I want you to come up with a very simple scene about a student who just got some bad news and is walking across campus, and convey, exploit angle, background setting, color and grain. And then you students, let's connect to other elements. Again, it's even though you're assigned, you're not assigned theater, the way someone walks and looks will contribute. But, I ask the students to pay special attention to angle, background, setting, casting, composition. And then we look at films, and I ask them to use these elements of the visual language. And when we look at their films, that's an important way of having the discussion. And when they look at films, for example, I gave the silly example of mermaids taking over the Pacific. This, I think, helps them be critical because they realize the way the filmmaker exploited these elements of the visual language to tell a story that seems like it's real, seems like it's objective and true. So I find this discussion very important. Another part of the discussion, can we go to the next slide, Prashant, is to ask the students about the different styles of documentary and to expose them to different styles of documentary. And I do this for two reasons. One, again, to sensitize them to the fact that ideas in a documentary tradition are conveyed in a variety of ways, not just interviews with B-roll, which is the fallback position too frequently. But when you're telling a documentary story, when you're telling a story, you, like the people in Bollywood and Hollywood and Nollywood, have the same flexibility of finding form that follows content. So maybe the best way to tell your story is not an interview with B-roll, but it is to follow this politician around in a cinema verite way, with the storyteller being, at least the illusion of the storyteller being the shooter and the sound person, without a narration, without a journalist. Or it's conceivable that the best way to tell the story is to break down the fourth wall and have the filmmaker be part of the process. Some say that's a more honest way of telling the film, of making a documentary, which is to say, I'm doing this because I happen to be in this part of the world, or here's somebody I met, and not sort of hide behind the illusion of objectivity, which the journalistic style creates. But what it does, I think, also from the filmmaker's point of view, is it opens things up so that we don't go to the more pedestrian and, I think, least exciting way of telling a story, which is B-roll. Interview, B-roll. Such and such happened. The History Channel at its worst. I find, not that I haven't learned from a professor sitting in front of a bookcase with black and white photographs, archival photographs and film against it. But that's not, that's okay, and sometimes it works, but it's not my favorite documentary. My favorite documentary, again, is When We Were Kings, where we travel, and we travel with my hero, Muhammad Ali. And we see him, I don't know if you've seen the film, I've seen it 100 times. I love the film. We see him at the end of the fight, in Zaire, going out into the countryside where he's a big hero. And there's this beautiful shot of this dude with his arm around this little girl who obviously worships him. That says so much about who he was. And nobody interviewed him and so on and so forth. And this list is useful, I think, just to break up, have the filmmaker and the students think that the documentary comes in more flavors than just the journalistic style. And obviously there's hybrids. You can have some verite, some reflection, and so there are some pure filmmakers who, like Frederick Weissman, if you know him, who's been making cinema verite films for years and years and years and years. And he's very pure. His films always are just shot, no narration and so on. News departments many times just do the journalistic style. Michael Moore, who I don't think is a great filmmaker now, he was, I thought, early in his career. Roger and Me, I thought was genius film, won Academy Award. He's very much a reflexive filmmaker. He's always there. So, thank you. We can leave the PowerPoint. So, the last thing I will say, and then I hope you have questions, is all of this discussion with, again, the objective of informing students, making them better citizens, better viewers, and preparing young people to be successful filmmakers, is to focus on the narrative model, the same model that is used in Bollywood or Hollywood, to come up with a log line that will unify your story. And I separate log line from content, from what the film's about, and from style. So log line, in a very, very simple, and again, you're in media, so you have heard this term before. In my view, the simplest description of log line is the unanswered question. So in the Western tradition, the Odyssey, the unanswered question is, will Ulysses make it home? He has all these obstacles. So the log line of my favorite documentary, When We Were Kings. Will the good guy, Muhammad Ali, the poet, win the fight? And the filmmaker exploits that the same way that Shakespeare exploits the love story, or that in Bollywood or Hollywood, the arc of the story is, if you like, exploited to keep us engaged. It's the trick that keeps us engaged. It isn't what the content's about. So When We Were Kings, the log line is, who will win the rumble in the jungle? You know, the fight in Zaire. We stick around to find out who wins. That's the unanswered question. Along the way, we learn about the history of the Congo, Zaire. We learn about Black music. We learn about racism. And in America, we learn about the lives of particularly Ali. We learn about big bucks media. But that's all buried in this log line. And like in Bollywood, if a scene doesn't fit into that log line, as beautiful as it is, as wonderfully as it's shot, you can't keep it because it won't feel coherent. Also, by having this log line, it invites exploiting the visual language. So we don't have to have an answer to the question, why is this man sad? And thank you for the comment about the image of the. Maybe we just begin a scene of a man who looks like he's very, very sad. And then there's a hint that he is in Canada, away from his culture and family and language. We don't know why. And then it's exposed, just like in Bollywood films or Hollywood films. I think the more pedestrian and the least interesting documentaries is where it's all set up in front. You know, it's all, here we go, sort of a PowerPoint with motion. Sometimes the best documentaries might not have any narration at all, any words at all. So those are some of my thoughts. We might finish by, I can give you just a taste of some of the work that I've done. Prashant, if you want to go to my website and and participants, please, if it's there for you to look at as well, which has trailers of all the films. So these are some of the films that we've done.
Can we see north of 49, sir?
Yeah, great.
Prashant, north of 49. Audio. 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 No audio, Prashant. Audio. 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 I have to go back. Go back. Go back. Audio. Audio. Yeah. Go back. Go back.
So this was a film made a while ago, still being seen.
Yeah.
You'll see.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. We had sound before. Okay.
You're not getting the audio, why?
Yeah, that's weird because we had it before.
Any other? Why you are not getting audio?
Yeah, it's strange. Okay. Well, my time's just about up anyway, and you're welcome to go see that. I will say that north of 49, I'm very proud of that. It's Govind Sadhan is a Sikh community not too far from where I live. And it's in a very provincial farming area. And 9/11, post 9/11, some people in the community read Govind Sadhan, God's house, as you know, Punjabi, as Go Ben Laden. And 4 teenagers burnt down the temple. And they were, they had heard things, they were teenagers, and they were arrested. And in open court, the Sikh leadership said to these kids and to the community, we love you, like we love our own children. And when our children do something wrong, we punish them, but we never stop loving them. And we want this to be about love, not about a cycle of hatred. And so that began the film and the rebuilding of the temple. We showed this film when it was finished to all the people who participated. And some of them didn't know.
What was that name? What was that name, that Sikh name you had? Instead of Bin Laden, what was that name?
Bin Laden. No. What is the name? I have Bin Laden in my head now. Govind Sadhan. Govind Sadhan.
Govind Sadhan.
So we showed the film in at the university.
They mistook it as Laden's temple.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was attacked.
Yes, and they attacked.
So you did an excellent documentary on that. And finally, they won the case in the court of law. They fought in the court. Yeah.
They were arrested and they went to prison.
So US citizens mistook it as the property of Obama
Bin
Laden, and they attacked it. Yes.
And the people wore Sikh, wore bandana, so these were very provincial people.
Actually, they are very good philanthropists and they were serving the society, but the people mistook it and they attacked the
right.
And they destroyed it. Yeah. So you have done an excellent documentary on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I told you when we were together, Professor, and I now share it with the participants, probably the most gratifying moment in my professional life was when we showed this film, and we showed the film to all the participants. And some of them didn't know each other. There was the farmer who didn't know the people who live in the city in this area, and so on and so forth. And in attendance was one of the arsonists, because one of the arsonists was a young woman who just gave birth to a little baby, and had an infant in her arms. She went to jail on the weekends. That was her punishment for 6 months. But she only was involved peripherally. Anyway, when the lights went down, the baby was restless. The baby was 2-3 months old. And actually, I think I held the baby for a little bit because I had seen the film, and the woman, the mother, had not. The arsonist had not. And then I held the baby for a bit, and somebody else. When the film was done and the lights came on, the leader of the Sikh community with his turban and his beard was holding the baby who was sleeping in his arms, holding the baby of the arsonist, the person who burnt down his temple. And probably didn't, I don't know, just one moment, a couple of people saw it. My students saw it. I was very gratified. But to me, that was a very special moment. We can do that with a documentary. We can do those kinds of things. Dissolve prejudice, racism. We can do that step by step. It won't happen overnight. So that's one of my favorite stories that, thank you, I got to share with you. So that's my deal. And if you have questions, I would love to respond.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your excellent presentation. First question is, what do you think is the future of the documentary? Because entertainment industry is growing very fast. According to you, what will be the future of the documentary in future?
Well, I think that it's much more democratic. I think the documentary will be more like maybe the novel, you know, in the beginning of the last century, because anybody can make a documentary. When we made our first films way back when you mentioned the dates, in India, you know, we had expensive cameras. The first film we shot in Bhutan, we shot on 16mm film. The overweight on the flight we took to India was the same amount of money that you could buy everything you need to make a documentary now. And you can make a documentary on your iPad. You can make a documentary on your phone, and you can edit it on your laptop. So anybody can make it. And so it's not owned, it's not the domain of just people with a lot of money or people who are connected. So I think it's very universal. And also, you know, there's all sorts of streaming, Canopy, and so on and so forth. If you have a good documentary, they'll pick it up. And it doesn't, that's the good news. The bad news is it's hard to make money, even if you have pretty good distribution. When I first started, we shoot on 16mm film. A university or somebody would buy the film, and we'd get, you know, income from that. And then DVDs, we'd go have showings and sell DVDs, many times, you know, online, but also, you know, on site. Now, I got a royalty statement from one of the distributors that I have for 73 cents. I mean, it wasn't worth the, you know, wasn't worth the letter that was sent, because, you know, there's not a lot of money for distribution. You have to find other strategies. But anybody can make them, and anybody can show them, and that wasn't true. And I think in terms of this era in which we want to be as inclusive as possible, that's very exciting.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Professor. There is one question from Suparna Naresh. She is from Christ University, Bangalore. Professor Richard, are you suggesting that documentary filmmakers should start addressing the issue of the present pandemic through the platform of cinema to bring in the required change? Is it being done already in the United States as we speak?
Yes, and not just in the United States, but all around. I mean, we have an international film festival, and some of the films, well, again, there's animation. Documentaries have been made with animation. There's one that looks like an opera, beautiful film about the tragic situation in Indonesia, which won recognition, Academy Award, I think, that was done really like an opera. So yeah, I think we are obligated to use all of the opportunities that the cinematic approach provides for no other reason than the competition. That's what the competition is using. Trying to sell Coca-Cola, people trying to sell us Coca-Cola use all the tricks. People who are trying to propagandize us to not use our brains, but just, follow an ideology blindly are using all the tricks. So if we're enlightenment people, we should use all the tricks as well in a responsible way. And I think stories, that's why I go back to the log line. Stories are the glue that lets us speak to all sorts of people in the audience, not just people who agree with us. So that's why I think I keep going back to When We Are Kings. It's a beautiful story. It's a great story. And along the way, you learn about racism. But if it was just about racism, people would say, oh, it's educational. Oh, that doesn't interest me. No, you engage people in their hearts.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. There is one question from Prashant Malur from Manipal University. His question is, camera movement has greater influence in engaging the audience than a block shot. What is your take on that?
Again, everything depends on context, obviously. But I'm a handheld guy. I like handheld. I think it feels like, you see feature films shot on handheld. It feels like it's alive. It feels like it's real, whatever real means, real in quotes. So yeah, and also the camera movement can give you, another favorite word I have along with logline is P.O.V. Can give you a sense of seeing the world through the eyes of your protagonist. So if the cop or the kid is running down the street, how does the child see the world as she runs down the street? So yeah, in general, I think camera movement is very, 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 very important and not exploited enough. There's times, of course, for tripoded steady shot in an interview sometimes.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Suparna Naresh has one more question.
Yes.
Can documentary films replace journalistic pieces?
Well, there's Vice. Depends what your appetite is. Journalistic, I think there's, with the breakout of journalism with cable, in the 70s and 80s, I think we just have too much out there. Whatever your point of view is and whoever your favorites are, I just think we have too much of people sitting around talking. There's plenty. I mean, there's not limited distribution anymore. So my feeling is, as a viewer, yeah, I would limit the amount of journalism and bring in documentary experiences. I think that's where it happens, because distribution is not an issue anymore in India or here.
Okay, thank you. There is one question from Archana Sharma. She is assistant professor in RIMT University. Her question is, sir, please explain about color and gain.
Color and gain, or grain? Grain. Yeah. Well, again, you got a choice. I mean, when you shoot, you can shoot in whatever, shoot in full color and so on and so forth. But in post-production, you can pull the color out. So you're doing a historical piece. You're doing a recreation of when Professor Ravi and I met in the 90s, and you want the color to you want it to be dated. Well, pull the color out. and that will make it look dated. You're talking about your black and white, maybe good. So manipulating color, and then grains, the same thing. You can manipulate that usually in post, which is, but there may be material that just comes to you as grainy. So we get information by those choices, and they are things that can be easily added to clean video, if you like. And so on. So if you're doing a historical documentary and you want to, again, give a feeling that it happened in the 1940s, then you go black and white. And if you want to give a feeling that it's archival, then you add grain to it, even though it's shot today.
Okay. There is one question from Dr. Rashmi Gautam. She is Assistant Professor of Journalism and Mass Communication, Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj University, Kanpur. What is the responsibility and challenges of a documentary writer?
Well, documentary writers, a lot of documentaries, not all, but a lot of documentaries are written by the filmmaker. I work with my partner, and we take responsibility for the writing. And that's kind of normal. It depends, obviously. But the responsibility of the writer and everyone else on the team, the leadership in particular, is to be, in my view, I hate to be too simplistic. I don't want to be too simplistic. It's to be true to the covenant. If you're writing fiction, you can put words in people's mouths. If you're writing documentary, you have to be careful that you're being true to the covenant, because people are going to take it seriously. Now, one of our films, which I'm very proud of, is about a man named John W. Jones, who was a fugitive slave. It's called Freedom's Call. And he escaped slavery and was heading north and ended up living his life not too far from where I'm speaking, in upstate New York. And we had an actor. He's been dead for more than 100 years. We had an actor speak as if it was John W. Jones. And he looked at his writings and wrote a script based on those writings. We had an obligation to be true to the spirit of what he said. Maybe not to every precise way in which he expressed himself, but to be true to that spirit.
Oh, okay, thank you, sir. There's one question from Dr. Rajappa Dalwai from Bangalore University. What is the making challenges between burning issues and making documentaries on personalities?
I mean, it's all, our job as documentarians is to enlighten people, engage and enlighten. I think it goes in that way, because you can have the greatest subject in the world, but if you don't engage people and they don't watch your documentary, then you're not going to get to them. If you as a documentarian think it's valuable to know about someone, I think that's good enough. And you're convinced you're not doing it just as an ego trip, but you're doing it because you think the world would be a better place knowing about his personality. That's fine. But I think the process is the same. You want to come up with a log line. So the film about John W. Jones, or the film about, just say with John W. Jones, the log line is, will John make it to Canada before he's caught by the slave catchers? So it was about that personality. And but we had a log line, a story to what we talked about earlier, use the cinematic process in the same way, whatever the type of film subject matter.
Okay, thank you. There's one question from Dr. Shilpa. She is the Assistant Professor of Acharya Institute of Graduate Studies. Her question is, sir, your opinion on preconceived notions on certain subjects obstructing in filmmaking the reality?
Well, I mean, we can't help but have predispositions. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can go at a subject without who we are, our predispositions. But as much as possible, if you make a documentary, I think you should be open to for those to be challenged, i.e., in terms of your intention and everything else. There's a very strong documentary that began about a clown, a real expensive clown that rich people use for their children's birthday parties. And this guy was going to make a film about this clown. And he began the process, and he found out that the clown's father was in jail for pedophilia. And he ended up making the film, it turned out that the accusations were not were not valid. He was accused of something that was not true. So it was tragic. He ended up taking his own life, suicide in prison. So the film started out as something very different. And the filmmaker responded to that. When we made the film in El Salvador, we had all sorts of predispositions, all sorts of plans. We make plans because you have to know what you're going to do on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, but you always leave space for the unexpected. And certainly some of the richest moments in my experience has been coming across something that was unexpected and quickly, reorganizing things, rethinking what you're doing. That's true, I think, of all creative work: cooking, fiction writing, painting, and documentaries.
Okay, thank you, sir. There is one question from Lazarus Lepcha. He's assistant professor of Loyola Degree College. How can documentary be made more commercial like films? Because documentary seems to have lesser scope.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I mean, certainly there are, you have bigger crews with fiction versus nonfiction. There's more money involved with different, those kind of obvious things. See, I don't know. Because if a documentary is too slick, I think it stops looking like a documentary. I think it just stops, if you like, smelling like a documentary. I mean, let's go back to that tragic event that was captured in the Floyd, when Mr. Floyd was murdered. Part of the reason it was so believable and credible is because of the way it was shot. So, there are documentaries, are recreations of documentaries, nonfiction recreations that can be highly produced. But in some ways, I think a documentary's roughness is part of its reality. And there are films that made a lot of money. I mean, I think of, what was the film by the Maisley brothers about the Rolling Stones? Can't recall the title. Or the film about Muhammad Ali. That made a lot of money, but didn't make as much money as the blockbuster makes in Hollywood or Bollywood. But part of the documentary, I think, is its roughness, because it feels authentic.
Okay. There's one question from Dr. Simi Varghese, Associate Professor of Prajyoti Niketan College, Pudukad, Thrissur, Kerala. As media academics, how should we approach documentary genre? How can we modernize documentary?
Organized documentaries. I don't know what, maybe the questioner could clarify what you mean by organize the documentary.
As media academics, how should we approach documentary genre? how can we modernize? She's talking of modernizing the documentary. How
Oh,
to
modernizing the document.
modernize
Yeah.
the document?
I'm sorry, I heard it as organized. Thank you. Yeah. Young people use, what they use with WeChat or what they use on Facebook. That style would very much modernize it. I think what we do as teachers is we offer them, what I tried to offer you with the visual language, with the log line discussion. I think those are universal. But the modernization, that's for our students to find a way of telling the story that would be appealing to young people and to modern audiences. And I think our job is, it's always tough to be a teacher. I think it's the most interesting, and I love the teaching process, because really people only learn by doing. Telling someone something in an overt way, do it this way, don't do it that way, you don't learn anything. So we're guides, like we are as parents, of course. And students will come up with a contemporary way of doing it. And we can too. I think just being true to the principles. I think hiding behind, that's why I'm not a great fan of interview B-roll. I've seen good documentaries. Recently I saw one about someone whose work I just so respect, Toni Morrison, the novelist. But she's much better than the documentary that was made about her. It was one long interview with B-roll. And, I'm a great fan, so I liked hearing her. But there's, to me, a more dramatic way of telling her story. I hope that answers your question, your good question.
And this is one question, a question from Sunil Kumar from SDM College, Ujire. The question is, commercialized entertainment industry is sidelining documentary format in India. How to get over this challenge?
Yeah. Well, I don't pretend. I mean, because there are people who are in control who have a predisposition toward, the format. I agree. I think what you can do is you don't need the institution to make a documentary. Less and less do you need to have a lot of funding up front. You can shoot your documentary on your phone, on your iPad, inexpensively. You can edit it yourself. You can get students to work with you to edit. You supervise them or you do it yourself. And sometimes you can prove your point to the gatekeepers by showing them an example of what you've done, or you can just skip the gatekeeper. More and more, I think that is the way the world is going, that the gatekeeper is not as significant as they were in previous generations. If you're a journalist, you can be a journalist without having a platform. And if you're a filmmaker, you can make a film without getting getting a lot of money. You can make it on your phone.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next question is from Dr. Shamla R. from Central University of Tamil Nadu. Kindly give your suggestions and advice to young budding documentary filmmakers.
I would repeat what I said last time, which is make a film. Find a subject and make a film. Shoot it on your phone. And collaborate with those people who you respect, and come up with an interesting subject. And ask some of the questions that we asked before. Is there an interesting log line that has universal appeal? You might ask the question, who's it for? Who'd you like to communicate to? Who might distribute it? From Netflix to Darshan to whoever. And I would say, take a course from some of the many people who are here, or just simply go out and make your film. And maybe connect with one of the many people here and ask them to give you feedback. But you don't need too much support to make your film. You can also, students ask me sometimes, well, I'm going to go to India, to study, and I want to make a film about that experience. And I've never made a film before. And I say, why not? You don't have to make a film. You can do a website. You can do a photo story. You can write in the tradition of the documentary. That's my thought.
Next question is from Panbu Selvam. Do you think online platforms like Netflix will help documentary commercially?
Yes. Yeah, I think they already have. I think they have. I mean, I am so sorry. I mean, I miss going to a theater and seeing a documentary. I think there's something nice about the communal activity. And to the extent that that can be protected, that's important. But yeah, Netflix has certainly increased distribution and opportunity for filmmakers. And the other side too is that we live in our own bubbles. We live in our own echo chambers. I watch documentaries that follow my interest. You watch documentaries that follow yours. That's too bad too. I ask my students, I give them credit for going to places that, and to content that is uncomfortable to them. And I do the same. I watch Fox News. I hate Fox News, but I watch Fox News because that's a good thing to do. Or I watch a documentary about a subject that they suggest that's particularly appealing to young people that doesn't, that's not made for me. And I'm glad I do. So that is one of the disadvantages of Netflix. The advantage is it provides opportunities, no question, not just Netflix.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question is from Anupama Kumari. In the time of T20, small stories, 1 or 2 liner poems, is there any scope for such short documentaries?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about Indian newspapers, but the major newspapers include short documentaries. And the best example of quality work, which, I strongly recommend My Enemy, My Friend, which is a beautiful film about the Iraq-Iran situation, was an op-doc film produced for the New York Times. The New Yorker magazine has short documentaries. There's a beautiful film, Joey's Violin, 2 years ago won an Academy Award about an old man who could no longer play his violin, but gave it to a young person. Very touching. And so yes, op-doc, and they take films from all over the world. So if you have a short documentary about, in fact, there have been films made in India, one really sweet film about a family, not just a couple, who had a pet rooster who lived in their apartment in, I don't know, Mumbai, some big city. And it was good, it was funny. And that was distributed through New York Times op-doc.
Okay. Smita Shanai, she has a question. Which was your favorite technique of making documentaries?
Again, form follows content. It depends on the subject. But my favorite is some version of verite. I mean, I like earlier question said about camera movement. I like shooting live, untripoded. I think there's a kind of opportunity that you can create in verite where people feel comfortable about the camera, and they're speaking sometimes to you, or they're almost performing. I don't mean in an artificial or ungenuine way, but sort of showing off who they are. If you have a relationship, develop a relationship with them from behind the camera. So I do like verite.
Okay. Next question is from Swati. What is your opinion about editing and ethics in visual editing?
Visual editing is what you do. I mean, it's the most important thing. Documentaries cannot be, I'm sure there's exceptions, but I would say 95% of all documentaries are made when they're visually edited, when they're edited visually and sound. As compared to fiction, which there's a lot of editing, but you know, you can storyboard an advertisement, you can storyboard certain scenes in a fiction piece, which in most instances, you get, your ratios are so large, you know, hundreds and hundreds of minutes to one finished minute. And so much of it is editing. And so much of it I find in helping people and myself, if you think in terms of layering, you know, create a visual layer, then another visual layer of the same event, then start building your soundtrack, different layerings, which, so everything is done in editing. I have a bunch of footage, you and I have the same raw footage, we could create radically different documentaries.
Okay.
It's all about editing. That's when you do your writing.
Okay.
No matter what. I mean, we pretend like we know what we're doing, but we don't, if we're really being honest about a documentary, because it's an act of discovery.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next question is from Vagdevi HS from St. Philomena's College, Mysore. It is a known fact that documentary films have less scope as compared to commercial films. Although documentaries are closer portrayal of life, do you think documentaries can assume wider scope and reach wider audience, especially in the era of OTT platforms, or will this have no effect at all?
Yeah, interesting. It is true. Isn't it interesting that documentaries, which sometimes take us closer to whatever, the truth, reality, people, have less scope, to quote the questioner. You know, so much of fiction film is, and I don't say this in a negative way, is escapism. You know, we're carried. We're not asked to have the same kind of set of feelings as even the most successful documentary. So no, I don't think a documentary will ever have the same appeal as Bollywood, Hollywood, you know, at its biggest. And it's the same in literature. The great novelists will not be read by as many readers as the more popular novelists.
There's a question from a student from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Usmania University, Telangana State. I think he's from Hyderabad. His question is, I want to be a good documentary filmmaker in future. What are the steps to take to do great documentaries? Sir, kindly give me some suggestions.
I would say, again, repeating myself, I would say go out and make a documentary, but make a short documentary first time out. And shoot it on your phone. No risk. Should make a 5-minute doc. I don't know, who this young person is, but if the person has no experience, cool. Go out and make, a short documentary about that interesting guy on the corner whose son is taking over his business. I don't know, and make that short documentary, and go through the steps and submit it to festivals or for distribution, and then because there's no other way to learn than to do.
Next question is from Shankar Ganesh. He is the research scholar from PSG College of Arts and Science, Coimbatore. Is it good to have censor for documentaries? because having censor for documentaries is like covering the facts with veil.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not a great fan of censors. It seems to me that, and oh my God, um, I mean, look at the YouTube phenomena. To me, it's no, I'm not a great fan of censors, especially in this day and age. And it's a real problem because some toxic material is getting in the hands of young, vulnerable people. So what do we do? One thing I'd love to do is get rid of algorithms on YouTube in particular. So at least the viewer has to make choices by himself rather than the institution, YouTube, feeding them what they want. I'm not a great fan of censorship of any sort. In this day and age in particular, so really we have to educate ourselves, and it's a real challenge. We don't have as much, I mean, we're in the middle of a plague. I think we'll conquer it with science, but the real challenge of our time is what to do about this giant monster media that defines the lives of our young people.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question is Dr. Prabha Shankar Mishra. He is Assistant Professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Mahatma Gandhi Kashi Vidyapeeth, Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh. His question is, what are the points to be kept in mind during choosing a topic for a good documentary?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think, is it important? Does the world need to know about the subject? And then, is it appealing? So I had the wonderful experience of working in India a couple of times. And I worked with Dr. Rajamani, who is a Doordarshan Chennai. And we wanted to tell the story of what it is to be a young Indian professional, urban, in India. That was the two of us. I was in partnership with this wonderful man. And so what Dr. Rajamani did was to give us options. A movie star, up-and-coming journalist of some note, and a businesswoman. And guess who we chose? 3 guesses. The movie star, because we could tell the story of what it was to be a woman, professional woman in India, urban India. But we had a better opportunity to get more people to screen the film and to be interested in the film if we had a movie star. So there's always these 2 gods to serve: one, the subject matter, and second, the appeal.
Thank you, sir. I think this is the last question we are going to take. This is Dr. Usha Devi. She wants to know how effective is documentary in bringing change in society?
Again, change in society, as we all know, is tough to do. Change usually happens, events outside of our screens and our political process, wars. The pandemic is changing things. But look what happened with the film about the murder of Mr. Floyd. Look how that changed the lives of so many people, millions of people. So I think it can. And there are other examples, but that to me is the most dramatic. And I think in some ways the internet, which provides all sorts of challenges to us, provides this opportunity for change to come about through documentary, nonfiction material. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
all
Thank you
those
very much.
questions.
Thank you very much, sir. Dear friends, we are coming to an end of this international webinar on the resiliency of media in the times of global crisis, challenges and opportunities. Today, you heard Professor Richard Breyer, Professor Television, Radio and Film, Newhouse School of Public Communications, Syracuse University, New York. He spoke about the future of the documentary, and there were quite a lot of questions. Sir, on behalf of Department of Communication, Bangalore University, we are very grateful to you, sir. In spite of your busy schedule, you made it. On behalf of all of us, I thank Professor Richard Breyer. Thank you very much, sir, for your excellent lecture and excellent interaction. So I take this opportunity to thank my two colleagues, Dr. N. Sanjeev and Dr. Shailashri, Associate Professors of Department of Communication, Bangalore University, and also recognize the presence of Professor Bala Subramania, the former chairman and professor, Department of Journalism, Karnataka University, and all my senior professors who are with us, a lot of vice chancellors, senior professors, academicians, researchers, my dear students, media professionals, social scientists from different parts of the country and different parts of the globe. They are with us. We are very thankful for all of you, and we are very grateful for all of you for such a roaring response we are getting every day. And I'm very thankful for all of you for your excellent feedback. Your encouragement and support will definitely help us in organizing quite a lot of events of this kind. So, my dear friends, kindly don't forget to send your feedback form even today. And please don't worry that all of you will get your certificates through your email. Nothing to worry. Every day I get quite a lot of queries about that. Please don't worry. Everybody will get your certificates. Subject to condition, you have to submit your feedback form. So today was the 5th day, and tomorrow is the last day of our international webinar. Tomorrow by 6 p.m., this 11th July, Dr. Daya K. Tusu, Professor of International Communication, Department of Journalism, School of Communication, Hong Kong, Baptist University, Kowloon Tong, Hong Kong, will be delivering a lecture on rethinking global communication for the post-COVID world. Please join us exactly by 6 o'clock, and after his lecture, maybe after 7 p.m., we will have the valedictory of this international webinar, where our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R. Venugopal, will preside over the function. We will have the chief guest, Dr. Daya K. Tusu, and we will also have Mr. Vinay Kamath, the editor-in-chief of the Mint, and a lot of dignitaries will be joining us tomorrow. Again, please join us tomorrow by 6 o'clock to listen to Dr. Daya K. Tusu. Once again, I'm very grateful for all of you, and again, thank Professor Richard Breyer and all the elders who have joined this session. Once again, don't fear COVID-19. Let us unitedly fight COVID-19. Please stay safe. Let us meet tomorrow exactly by 6 p.m. Welcome to all of you. Namaste. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.